Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the xDuoo TA-26S, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank Apos Audio for providing the xDuoo TA-26S for review. Greatly appreciate it. Apos Audio, you rock. Alright, so the xDuoo TA-26S. This will set you back $320 from your bank account, and it is a tube, amplifier, and preamp. The xDuoo TA-26S has 500 milliwatts of power, a gain of 16 dB, THD and N of around 0.1%, frequency response range of 10 Hz to 30 kilohertz, and it uses 6N8P and 6N5P tubes. It can double as a preamp, and it has 6.35 and 4.4 millimeter outputs. The xDuoo TA-26S. This thing is a chunk. It is rather heavy, and it's fairly large. You have your 6N8P tube, and then your 6N5P tube. You can use 6 SN7s for both. You do get a little bit less power when you swap out the 6N5P for the 6 SN7. And we'll talk about tube swapping here in a moment. On the front side, you have a big, huge red volume knob, your 1/4 inch and 4.4 headphone outputs, and a little LED light. And then on the back side, you have your master switch, your AC in, and your RCA in and RCA out. Got some venting on the side. Here's a look at the top here. Let's plug it in and see how it looks. So xDuoo does include a power supply. You just plug her in. And as you can see, that LED light is actually quite bright. I was not a huge fan of the LED light, so maybe cover that up with something to lessen it. We'll turn the lights out here in a moment, show you what it looks like with the tubes lit up, and that big, huge, nasty power light. It takes quite a few minutes, well, moments to heat up and for those tubes to activate. So do be patient using tubes. And all right, let's turn those lights off and see what it looks like in the dark. All right, so you can see that the tubes light up nicely, but that power light is rather bright. And so I prefer to put something over it, cover it up, and you can see the tubes a lot better. Different tubes will kind of, change in how bright they glow. The stock tubes are pretty adequate. The 6N5P does glow pretty well, but the little 6N8P in the front is not near as glowy. Okay, back on with the lights come, and let's talk about the TA-26S. And just overall, the build of it is hefty and big and bulky. It's, somewhat slender, so it's not going to take up that much space on your desk, but you're going to want to give it a little bit of room to breathe, as it does get rather hot. Being a tube amp, the tubes get extremely hot, and you will feel a little bit of a warmth to it if you're close by. So do give it a little bit of breathing room, and make sure there's nothing around it that's going to melt plastic or anything if it touches it. The overall heat, though, is not so hot that you can't touch the amplifier. It's just warm to the touch. It feels very durable, and as I said, this thing is a chunk and a half. The red volume knob stands out. I like the look of it. I think it looks really cool. Being an xDuoo, I've always loved the little red volume knobs. As far as tube amps and my experience. Very limited. I do not have a whole lot of experience with tubes or tube amps. I do own a Tor Audio Roger that I've used for several years and truly enjoy that. But I don't use it as often as I should. And also I don't have a lot of opportunities to just sit and use it. So it's kind of a thing that I use when I have the time. And so tubes and tube swapping isn't really something I'm super well experienced with, but I've done it through the years as I've reviewed a few tube amps. Now this is the first tube amp that I've used that has the 6N5P as the preamp tube, and or excuse me, as the buffer tube, and I don't have any exact 6N5P tubes to swap it with. I do have several different 6SN7s though, and so thankfully the 6N8P is swappable with the 6SN7, and lo and behold I learned that the 6N5P also can be swapped for a 6SN7. And so I've learned as I use this amplifier, and some of the tubes that I really enjoyed. Now stock wise, the tubes on the TA-26S that xDuoo provided are okay. I found that they had a little bit lighter of a note weight and were more neutral leaning, but they also had a little brittle side to things. And the uppers were a little bit more forthright, and it didn't really have that tubiness that I get from my Tor Audio Roger or with some of the other tubes. And so I started exploring what I have laying around here at the office and plug and play. And so some of the tubes that I really enjoyed. Now I mostly changed out the 6N8P, but using 6SN7s. And so I tried the Savani, and I really enjoyed this. I found that this added in a little bit of warmth while also adding some more of a little bit more of a note weight to the TA-26S, and it had this airy presentation, but not quite as like the stock tubes. The stock tubes were a little too light and a little too forthright. The Savani added in a little bit of note weight while still giving that airy presentation, but also not being as forthright, especially in the uppers. And then I tried the Ray tube. This is the 6SN Select, and I found that this one adds in a little bit more note weight than the Savani, but you don't have quite as wide of a sound stage. It's a little bit closer, but you get better depth and better layering, and it's a little bit more exacting in its precision of details and resolution. And so I really did enjoy both of those tubes. I found that the Ray tube was slightly better than my Savani. And then I tried an Electro Harmonics, and I really enjoyed the Electro Harmonics, but the Electro Harmonics was similar to the stock tube in that it was more neutral leaning and a little bit wider in staging. Didn't quite have as deep of a stage depth, and layering wasn't quite as good. But I also found it was a little bit more hazy. It wasn't quite as clean and clear as the other tubes. And then my favorite of all the tubes that I've tried is the Tunxel. I really enjoyed the Tunxel. I found that the Tunxel had a nice warmth to it. You got that ooey gooey kind of lush analog type of sound from tubes that's to be expected, and it just added in nice note weight and body. And even though it didn't have the expansive soundstage like a couple of the tubes added in, it had a more natural presentation, and it did a really good job of showing the different sizes and venues. And then it had really nice depth and layering, and those details and resolution were very precise and accurate. And so I really enjoyed the Tunxel. And then I explored it using the various tubes that I have, along with the stock 6N5P, swapping that out and using two 6SN7s. And that also worked very well. But I did find that when I used the 6N5P, I had a little bit more power and a little bit more authority. Whereas the 6SN7, when I replaced it with it was not quite as powerful. I didn't have as much headroom on the volume knob, and it was a little bit more airy of a presentation, and it didn't quite drive as well. So I really enjoyed being able to tube swap with the limited tubes that I do have and a little bit of experience that I have with it. I do want to grab some other 6N5Ps to be able to use along with this at some point. But it does a really good job of portraying differences in the tubes. As far as driving headphones, now this was really interesting because I've used the Tor Audio for a long time, and I have found that the Tor Audio works quite well with pretty much anything that I have as far as headphones and some IEMs. The TA-26, on the other hand, was very picky. And I really struggled to find pairings, especially with stock tubes. And now the headphone impedance recommendation is from 60 ohm to 600 ohm. So it really does not work very well at all with IEMs. I was not able to use IEMs with it. It distorted real quickly. It hummed, it hissed, it had all kinds of distortion. It was not good. So do not use this with IEMs. Even easier to drive headphones struggled. Rode NTH 100s, Austrian Audio, Hi-X 60s, and things below 60 ohms were very finicky. And you really had to have a balancing act. And it was just somewhat difficult to make them to sound proper. And so what I found was that the TA-26S really enjoys Audio-Technica R70X and Sennheiser's. I was extremely happy with both Audio-Technica R70X and any of my Sennheisers. 580 Precisions, 600s, 660 S2, 8XX, you name it, I enjoyed them. And even though most of them had to be driven with the balanced output, 4.4 balanced output, it did an exceptional job with those headphones. Trying it with planars, it just didn't work. I couldn't find a planar that it didn't distort with or sound terribly underpowered. But Audio-Technica and Sennheiser, this thing is like a match made in heaven. And I really enjoyed it. I found that it had a nice, lush, warm, ooey gooey type of presentation that was just very immersive and engaging. And it had natural tone and timbre and excellent detail retrieval and resolution with a very nice natural soundstage. It took those Sennheisers that tend to be just a little bit smaller, added in just a little bit more width and depth and excellent layering, and along with that exceptional imaging that Sennheisers are known for, and it just, you could nitpick the track, but yet enjoy it and just sit back and relax to the music. The Sennheiser TA-26S is just, it's the chef's kiss, yes, I guess, when it comes to a tube amp with Sennheisers. And then the Audio-Technica R70X was phenomenal. You had that nice big stage and that an excellent imaging that the R70X has, and that preciseness and that placement in the stage. And then you had that little bit of oomph in the bass with that little fullness, and then those nice airy but yet natural mids with that exceptionally extended treble with that airiness and crispiness and that edge and that bite, and everything just played together very well and just sounded natural. I really enjoyed the R70X with the TA-26S, and you could hear the differences when you put a tungstle on, or you put an electro-harmonics on, or you put a Savani on, or you put a Ray tube on, or you put the stock tubes in, it didn't matter. You heard the difference on the TA-26S. I really enjoy this amplifier. Using it as a preamp, it did a pretty good job. It did add in just a little bit of warmth to it. You could hear some subtle differences with the tubes, and it kind of depended on what amplifier you used it with, or if you were going out to a speaker amp. I didn't use it a whole lot that way. I used it as a headphone amplifier mostly, but it does work as a preamp as well, and I found it to be just exceptional. Now, one thing of note, the output for the preamp and the headphone output work at the same time. So they do not turn off when one is activated. So just make sure that you're aware of that and you aren't plugging your headphones in if you have it blasting through speakers or another alternate amp. So the xDuoo TA-26S, it's a clean, clear amplifier that allows the tubes to tell the story, and I truly do enjoy it, especially with Sennheisers and Audio-Technicas. And if you have a collection of Sennheisers and Audio-Technicas that you're really trying to find a tube amp with, I highly recommend the little TA-26S. How's it compared to my Tor Audio Roger? I've mentioned several different things about it throughout this video, and I find that the Tor Audio Roger is a little bit more compatible with all the different gear. It works with some IEMs and planar headphones, and dynamics isn't quite as fussy. It does show the differences in tubes as well, but it doesn't quite have as much power as the TA-26 does. And it seems to be, you have to go higher up on the volume knob to really drive some things. One thing of note though with the Tor Audio Roger is you can run another, you can kind of use a pre with it, and it doesn't distort. I found that using that with the TA-26 didn't work as well. So you're in the market for a tube amp to work with your Audio-Technica R70X, or your Sennheiser 660S2, your 8XX, or your 600s or your 580 Precisions. Check out the xDuoo TA-26S. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video somewhere. Speaking of, hey, let's try that again. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links and notification bells if you haven't already. Don't forget to check those off, and then don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video, and check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you can follow the channel and support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, I want to thank my supporters through Patreon and YouTube memberships, and also one-time gifts. Thank you very much for all that you give to the channel. It is much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can do it through one-time gifts, PayPal, Venmo, and YouTube. Or you can do monthly subscriptions with Patreon and YouTube memberships, where you get some extra benefits, like you can get a video early. You can also chat with me directly on my Discord server. Speaking of my Discord server, if you're interested in joining that, there's a link down below. It's open to the public. But if you're interested in supporting the channel, it'd be greatly appreciated. And I do appreciate everything that's been given to you. Also, down below, there's all kinds of other information regarding how you can check out my gear rankings and my music recommendations and gear recommendations and all kinds of other things listed down below. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music, and that honesty is the best policy.